Deletions, changes,
Sir.
comments from the town attorney,
No, sir.
comments from the public on any item that is not on our agenda. Would you have a consent agenda to approve the minutes? Is there a motion to approve as submitted?
So move.
Second. I'll conduct a roll call. Chair Stern,
Aye.
Vice Chair Aird's not here. Board Member Ferguson,
Aye.
Board Member Shearer. Aye. Board Member Rudolph.
Aye.
Board Member Butler.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Have there been any requests from the public to speak on our next item?
Not that I received.
Ordinance number 792, establishing a temporary moratorium on commercial mixed use and multi-family development.
I'll do it, Mr. Chairman. So if you recall, last year we did, or staff did at the direction of council, came forward with a moratorium, and that one was really just for mixed use projects. The board did recommend approval, it went up to council, and then council decided not to move forward with that. Well, as you know, council has been very busy. And recently the council did execute an interlocal agreement with Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to do a master plan and community vision. So that's one thing. Also contemplating contracting with a planning firm to do some revisions to the zoning code as well. So the council at this point in time decided they wanted sort of to take a pause on new development because of all these things going on, and all the issues in traffic and aesthetics and how new projects will impact the infrastructure and all those types of things. So council did direct this office to bring forward a moratorium on basically on all new commercial mixed use and multifamily development. It wouldn't affect the residential single family or the residential or the historic districts. We'd still process those. So we wouldn't accept any new applications. The moratorium it's anticipated that within the next year, the master plan will be completed, hopefully. The moratorium is only for a year because a year is basically as long as you can go for this type of pause on development. Under Burt Harris, which is, we've kind of talked about peripherally, Burt Harris it's an act for if your property rights have been inordinately burdened. Basically, under Burt Harris, anything under a year is a temporary impact that's not actionable. So we don't have to worry about any Burt Harris claims if we keep it under a year. And the case law is like a year is about as far as you could go. So that's what this ordinance does. Before the meeting, I had a question from staff about amendments to existing applications or amendments to existing site plans. I don't believe the intent is to prohibit those, and I'm going to have to, and I'd like to get the board's input on that. But I don't think the intent was to prohibit those. Especially if the impacts will be reduced or it's just aesthetic or, it's just appearance review, that type of stuff. But free to take any thoughts the board may have on that issue and any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Clarification limit is a year being 365 days. Again, will we write towing the line should be 364?
No, it could be a year. So the way it's written, it's really a year or until that master planning process is completed. Because this is how I anticipate. So, and I've been through a master plan before in North Palm Beach, and they had Treasure Coast do it too. So just to give y'all a little how that goes. So basically they come with master plan, but at the end of this process, they'll have a lot of pretty drawings but they will have recommendations as to changes to the zoning code to implement the master plan. So like I'm using North Palm Beach as an example because I lived it. In North Palm Beach, they decided to go to a more form-based code for they're trying to revitalize. It's, every city or municipality has its own, what they're trying to do. North Palm has a very old commercial corridor. If you've driven through it on US 1 and on North Lake Boat. So they were really trying to revitalize their corridor. So they were trying to attract development. So they felt like in that case, a form-based code was the way to go because it's, you know, it's more about function than the rules and the setbacks. They also wanted to push everything closer to the street, sort of that new urbanist, you know, if you push it closer to the street, it attracts attention, slows down traffic, makes it more pedestrian friendly, that kind of stuff. So I anticipate once that the Treasure Coast completes its master plan process for the town of Juno Beach, that they will have recommendations. So at that point, we can move forward those recommendations. And if the council is actively working to implement them, we could have like a zoning in progress that people are aware that these changes are coming and they would have to comply with them. But the moratorium is basically, we're not accepting any new applications during this period. And as I said, it's sort of taking a pause. You know, we had Coretta well underway. You know, the Juno Dunes project, the Pulte project, which is the appeal. I mean, if anyone wants to know about that, I'll kind of talk to you offline, but the appeal is still pending on that, but it's already an approved project, wouldn't apply to that. But the question is whether it would apply to, and I guess there's some commercial developments that might come in for amendments to existing site plans, either reducing or changing the appearance. I don't believe that the council's intent is to include those. It's really new projects that are going to add traffic, add, you know, demand on the infrastructure, add demand to the levels of service, that kind of stuff.
Are there any new projects that you're?
Not that we know of.
Okay.
That's
I
why
mean,
it seemed like a perfect time.
Yeah. Then speaking.
Right.
So if there's nothing that sort of, that anybody has a sense of no rumors of trade, so to speak,
No.
then it probably would be a very good time.
Yeah, we're not, staff is not aware of any pending applications at this time.
And as you said, currently existing commercial properties could amend to
Yeah,
appearance or things like that.
that's-
Well,
that's the
not,
intent.
yeah, it's not really, I don't think that's really what the development application is.
Yeah, this is really more about, yeah, the demand for services, traffic, those kind of things.
So this is a process and it could actually take longer than a year.
It could take longer than a year. And I don't know. I don't know what the date is. I think they're ready. The contract was executed a couple months ago, so they're already underway. So hopefully it will be within, by the time this gets adopted, it still will have to go to council for 2 readings. So by the time it gets adopted on second reading, we're still talking another month, 2 months anyway. So it should take us through the master planning process.
And we always would have the option to extend it a little further if we needed to.
I really don't want to extend it.
I understand.
It may be if we have to extend it for a month or two, we can, but hopefully by the end of that year, we'll at least have a direction coming out of that master planning process of what we, or what the council wants to do at that point in time.
So the timing of this moratorium would be from when to when?
It would be from the date of adoption to a year past that.
And the steps to get it approved is,
It's just, it just comes before this board for recommendation and then 2 readings before the council. It's adopted the same way. The case law says it's adopted the same way as the zoning ordinance. So we're going to follow those same steps because essentially it's a zoning ordinance saying we're not accepting anything else, you know, for this limited period of time.
Well, the ordinance is very clear. It's drafted. Very good job.
Well, thank you.
Right.
I guess I would comment that we know that there's been a considerable amount of public disquiet in the past several years over projects like Coretta and Pulte project. And there seems to be quite a clear need for the public to have a chance to understand better what our criteria are and what our vision is for the future of the town. The fact that people are apparently so widely misled by irresponsible newsletters that are being sent out with various aspects of panic attached seems to really underline the need for much greater public discussion of what our policies are and getting input from the public. And for that reason alone, regardless of what the master plans may say, the very fact that this is going to involve public input in the process is a real plus to me. And I think that's very much needed right now, because otherwise you have the wild rumor mongers out there simply sowing discord and distrust. And that's a matter of real concern.
Well, we have the public sitting here, most of the town council. I doubt anybody wants to make a comment, and they don't. So I'm just willing to entertain a motion right now, to approve as drafted.
I'll put the rush out there. Motion to approve as drafted the memorandum for
Ordinance, yeah,
sorry.
it's ordinance 79.
For a moratorium on commercial mixed use and multifamily development.
Second,
I'll conduct a roll call. Chair Stern,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ariett,
Aye.
Board Member Ferguson,
I
Board Member Shearer,
aye.
Board Member Rudolph,
Aye.
unanimous. Thank you.
we approved the memorandum to Frank and Stephen.
It's fine.
Comments from the board?
I do actually. I have a matter that I'd like to bring up, and perhaps I need some guidance from town staff as to how we might do this. But I'm concerned that we've had the appearance review for single-family homes coming to us with apparent sincere misunderstanding on the part of a couple of applicants. And I know staff has been very available to guide people, but nevertheless, because of the nature of perhaps I'll say a lack of clarity in our current appearance review criteria, particularly around the idea of harmony, I think we're really putting applicants or potential applicants in a very awkward situation. And I'm concerned about that. The council is going to be discussing harmony and trying to see if they can create greater clarity there. I'd like to take a somewhat parallel approach to this issue and talk about the old Florida style, because all of our single family appearance standards are supposed to revolve around what in our books is called old Florida. So we can have the Key West style, we can have Victorian, we can have Mediterranean, and we can have mid-century modern. Mid-century modern seems to be the real problematic case because we've turned down a couple of these houses on the basis of various criteria. One of the concerns I have is stylistic. And what I would like to have the council do is to have a discussion to try to clarify, what do we mean by mid-century modern style in the context of old Florida? Now that sounds like a contradiction in itself, because you think mid-century modern is modern and old Florida is not. However, if you look at something I've cited different times before, the University of Florida has a wonderful book on mid-century modern style in Florida, and they argue that there is such a thing as a Florida-specific mid-century modern style. And our code, not our code, but our appearance guidelines don't state what that is. We've got people like Frank Gehry coming up with these fantastic buildings with all kinds of wonderful spirals and things like that. The applications that we're getting aren't anything like that, but here's a key phrase I'd like you to listen to. This is what I'd like us to be able to discuss as a board if we have the approval of town staff. According to the University of Florida book, they state here in this one house in particular, defining features characteristic of mid-century modern Florida residences include an emphasis on horizontal planes. It's important, I think. Geometrically defined spaces and enormous windows. And it goes on after that. But I think the key term here is horizontal planes, because some of the applications we have seen are, as you've heard me criticize, highly vertical structures, which in neighborhoods where you have very horizontal buildings, the classic ranch house, for example, it's a jarring contrast. Whereas the mid-century modern style can very, very easily incorporate horizontality in its design. And that can be done not only by making sure you don't have two-story buildings with rigid rectangular corners without any raking lines anywhere along the building, purely stucco and vertical lines, sometimes even with the tower attached. If you look at the examples that are in the University of Florida book, you see that because the houses emphasize large windows, they almost always have some kind of eyebrows over the windows and or built-in canopy structures, not flexible, but built-in rigid canopies, because you're exposing yourself to the light, but you're also blocking the direct sunlight coming in. And that immediately breaks up the verticality of the lines. And I don't want to go into any kind of details of how you might do that. That's not for us to decide. But I think if we take this principle that there should be a clear sense of horizontality in mid-century modern houses in our code, where perhaps code is not the term, but in our guidelines for aesthetic review. I think that could be helpful, and I think it would also tend to dissipate this jarring discord we seem to feel between the applications we've had so far for mid-century modern and what we might be able to get here, some houses that would be much more compatible in their neighborhoods. At least that's my subjective term. So my proposal would be, if maybe Frank needs to speak to this, I don't know, or Stephen, could we put this as a discussion item on our agenda to see if we can come up with some sense of agreement here for how we might clarify mid-century modern Florida, and make a recommendation for council to consider a change.
Would this be for single family homes or would this be for, because right now, it is staff's understanding that the Florida statute is not allowing us to dictate architectural styles, which is the building design elements. Now, there could be an argument to that, and I believe at the February 18th town council meeting that will be discussed to see which approach we want to take. But currently, staff is not reviewing architectural styles for single family homes. So that number one section of that criteria is not being discussed anymore.
Frank, in this case, I don't see that we're coming up with a new style. We're simply trying to clarify what mid-century modern Florida means.
Well, he's just saying we haven't been applying the architectural styles based on the statutory language, but
Right,
it is
so
something we
if-
are going to discuss.
So for further clarification, if you wanted to maybe discuss creating a pattern book that will tell you, to give you specifics on that, which was the recommendation of the architectural charrette, then, that would be a recommendation that we take to council. But currently, that would only apply to 2 families and above. And then if for some reason we changed that, the interpretation, that, hey, we are going to look at architectural styles for single family homes, then we'll just make it apply to them as well. But currently, we're not.
I think I mentioned in a previous meeting, and it sort of flows into the same concept that if we come up with an explanation of what the elements are that would be acceptable, that this is something that I love your idea. We should just push it further upstream when people, individuals make application. This is something they're also being given so that they don't feel like they do everything according to what the criteria are, come here and then all of a sudden find out, wait a minute. I mean, they need to have that information so they can make that part of their consideration in doing their design. And I think, it's just more information.
Well, just to clarify, one of our requirements is to have a pre-application meeting with staff. And that's when staff gives them that.
I agree, and I think that's great, but I think something.
No, I'm sorry. So that comes with a checklist of everything that we require, and we give them examples of projects that have passed and that have failed. So we tell them like, hey, look, so-and-so did this, and this is the documents that they provided. We give them a checklist for them to check off. So that's really more than, a municipality would normally do, plus the pre-application meeting. It's just that in the circumstance where we had 2 applicants give you something and then, it's like, oh, that doesn't meet it. I was not aware of it. That really wasn't the case. They were informed. They were aware. It's just that's what they said at the meeting. But I want to say, At one point, we even extended our application that I need something 28 days in advance. So that way we have enough time to actually tell them, whatever you gave me, it's lacking A, B, and C. You need to, work on that. So we are learning from the very beginning, because in the beginning, it was new to all of us. But slowly but surely, we've been making changes to that application and the process itself.
Frank, I'm concerned that people would come as far as bringing their application to the board here. And in the most recent case, they cited as their model for their design a house that already exists in Juno Beach, which is a total contradiction to what the style says. And it just seems so glaringly disconnected that if we could do anything to make your job easier in informing people, simple words like emphasizing horizontal versus vertical alone would be helpful. Because as soon as I saw that, I was shocked and said, how could they point to that when virtually everybody I've ever heard in town points to that house and says, that is ugly and we don't want that here. Of course, that might just be me, but or I speak to the wrong crowd, but
Yeah, that's a difficult thing to do, just because, again, it's likes and dislikes, architectural style. So, we do show them what the code is. They sign up saying that I understand what that code is, they initial the application. But
I'm not
They
talking about
still-
code change, just more orientation, better
yeah,
orientation.
I mean, we still have to allow them to submit the application that they want to submit. Correct? And then, even though they're aware that, hey, staff is going to give you a recommendation of denial, they still move forward because they want to see, what does the PNC board have to say? Maybe they'll disagree with staff, and that has happened, and we're okay with that.
Your denial's been based more on things like mass and scale as opposed to, I don't know.
But
Why do we call it
again, it's
style?
because we're not looking at architectural style, right? That's why.
I have a concern
Mhm.
about the subjective nature of harmony. And the concern is that the makeup of the planning and zoning board changes from year to year. And what we might find to be not harmonious in one situation could come up again in another year and be held to be harmonious. And I'd like to see somehow that gets tightened up more. Maybe defining more, looking at mass and volume. And would ask the council to think about that. I'll let our attorney talk about this, but could there be a possible lawsuit where in one year something is approved and virtually the same thing and the next year isn't? I don't know.
They're never going to be virtually the same. I mean, unless it's the exact same plans. They're all, you consider each, we've talked about this before, you consider each application on its merits. And yeah, 5 people, if it's a different 5 people, might come to a different conclusion based on the evidence presented, but that's their prerogative. But, they're not going to be identical. I mean, they might be similar, and
It could happen in the same zoning district.
Yeah, to add your statement, Chairman Stern, I'm concerned about the subjective nature of the limiting requirements, because there's not hard objective criteria to how much bigger. We're always going to be dealing with a new project that's bigger, more dense, more volume than the existing houses as these streets get to be redeveloped. And if we don't have objective criteria for what's going to meet the criteria, whether it's a percentage larger than the largest home that's set out in concrete, we are going to get a legal challenge from someone who's going to say, this is totally subjective. I've met all the other code provisions and redeveloping this property, and you're telling me it's just simply too big in your subjective view. And we are going to get a lawsuit. So I think we need to be proactive and be looking at the harmony requirement and putting in some real objective, achievable standards in there that applicants who come before the town can say, I understand what you're telling me. You don't want a huge mansion here, but it's going to be a bigger home, or we have to be within the footprint. There has to be some objective standards that we know going in. If we meet these, we should be entitled to approval of our project. Because it just seems to me to be putting aside aesthetics and whether you like the architectural style, there's got to be some more objective standards in the harmony requirement, or no one's going to be able to satisfy it. As we redevelop these streets in these communities, and we are putting ourselves at risk where someone's going to say, "I'm not taking your answer, no," and then I file suit. And if we lose, now we've created a slippery slope where the whole harmony aspect, which is important to the redevelopment of our town, maybe gets tossed out. You know, you toss out the baby with the bathwater. So I would encourage staff and planning and zoning to try and work on redefining, improving the harmony definition requirement to provide some real concrete standards for applicants to know they can meet.
We can't lose sight of the fact that when somebody buys a piece of property, they have property rights and they're meeting the ordinances. So this board is put to try to balance those equities, and like to see it tightened up so that it would be
But we do have this as
able
a
to
discussion.
avoid getting into those situations.
Correct. So we do have this as a discussion item for the meeting on the 18th for this month. I'll make sure to bring up those comments to council when we're making the presentation. But we did know that when we were creating this language, that, there was a possibility that somebody's not going to like it. And if we look at the history of other municipalities that have architectural boards for 10, 20 years and even more, they have all eventually been sued by somebody that just didn't like the answer. So, it is something worth the discussion. I'll bring it up to council when we have that meeting on the 18th, and just follow direction at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another comment? Hearing none, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.